Welcome to Inside the Resume. Today we're going to talk about Gennady Triple G Golovkin, the former Unified Middleweight World Champion, the reigning IBF Middleweight Champion of the world with a professional record of 41 victories, 1 defeat and 1 draw. Gennady Golovkin had an illustrious amateur career, winning a bunch of gold medals in Asian Games, Asian Championship, the World Cup, the Junior World Championship, the gold medal at the World Amateur Championship, and the silver medal at the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, after which Gennady turned professional in 2006 and spent an early portion of his professional career fighting in Germany. After mastering a record of 18-0 with 50 knockouts, Gennady Golovkin traveled to Panama for his first title fight. It was an interim WBA title against Milton Nunes, a fight which Golovkin won in a spectacular first round KO and therefore became the WBA interim champion at the time when Felix Sturm was the WBA middleweight champion of the world. So after that, in 2010, Felix Sturm, being a long-time WBA middleweight world champion, was elevated to super champion, and therefore Gennady Golovkin was also elevated from WBA interim to WBA regular champion, and he went on to his native Kazakhstan, where he defended his newly acquired title against Nilson Julio Tapia, another spectacular knockout in the third round, after which Gennady Golovkin returned to Panama to fight tough challenger Kasim Ouma. It was a very good fight. Gennady Golovkin prevailed and stopped Ouma in the 10th round. His next two fights took place in Germany and Ukraine respectively. First, a first round knockout victory over Lajuan Simon, and then third round stoppage over Makoto Fujigami. Two very good victories for Golovkin at the time, and it was at this time that he tried to push for the mandatory fight against Felix Sturm, but it was not to be. The WBA would not sanction the fight, and Felix Sturm was able to move on and continue to fight whoever he wanted at the time. And the middleweight championship landscape was the following. So Felix Sturm was the WBA super champion. He was making the biggest money in the division at the time, and he was about to fight Sebastian Zbik in a big money domestic showdown after a draw against Martin Murray. The WBC title was contested between Sergio Martinez, the lineal champion who was stripped off the WBC belt, and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who was awarded that belt. So Sergio and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. were fighting in a big pay-per-view showdown in the US. The IBF champion was Daniel Gill of Australia, and the WBO champion was Dmitry Pirog. So Gennady Golovkin, being unable to secure what was perceived at the time to be his career-defining fight against Felix Sturm, proceeded and tried to negotiate a fight against Dmitry Pirog, who did agree on a fight and was even stripped in 2012 for deciding to fight Gennady Golovkin and not his WBO mandatory. So unfortunately for Golovkin, that fight ended up falling through because Dmitry Pirog, known for his injuries, injured his back once again and was unable to fight Triple G. So Triple G tried exploring another option at the time and was able to secure an HBO deal where he traveled to the US and made his United States debut in a fight against Grigory Sproksa, the European champion. It was the first time the American public was able to watch Triple G fight, and he performed well. He destroyed Grigory Sproksa, dropped him multiple times and stopped him in the 5th round for a successful US debut. On that same day, on September 1st, 2012, there was a unification fight happening in Germany between Felix Sturm and Daniel Gill for the WBA Super and IBF Middleweight Championships of the world, and it was a shocking upset loss for Felix Sturm, who lost a split decision to Daniel Gill. Many people say undeservedly so, but anyway, Daniel Gill ended up being the unified WBA Super and IBF Middleweight World Champion. and after that he was finally ordered by the WBA to fight his mandatory, the regular champion Gennady Golovkin, and Daniel Geale ended up vacating the WBA super title and then by default enabling Gennady Golovkin to finally become the legitimate WBA middleweight champion of the world. It was from this point that Gennady Golovkin became a legitimate title holder in the middleweight division, and there was a lot of controversy about this because a lot of people, a lot of media outlets are counting all of Triple G's title defenses, even those regular title defenses, those first 5 regular title defenses, which really don't count because it was Felix Sturm who was the true WBA middleweight champion of the world at the time. So Triple G then returned to the US and made the first legitimate title defense of his middleweight crown against Gabriel Rosado. It was a solid fight where Gabriel Rosado was beaten up and stopped in 7 rounds, after which Gennady Golovkin went to Monte Carlo and defended his title once again, knocking out Nobuhiro Ishida in the 3rd round. Triple G's next 2 victims were Matthew Macklin, who Triple G destroyed in 3 rounds, and Curtis Stevens, who was stopped in 8 rounds in November 2013. The landscape in the middleweight division once again shifted at the time. Sergio Martinez was now the WBC Middleweight World Champion. He wasn't too keen to fight Triple G, while in the meantime Daniel Geale was defeated by Darren Barker, losing his IBF title. And Darren Barker went to Germany to defend his title against Felix Sturm in a fight where Felix Sturm destroyed Barker inside 2 rounds and once again became a title holder in the middleweight division, holding the IBF belt. And the WBO champion was Peter Quillin, who was under a lot of pressure to fight Triple G, but he just plain refused to fight Gennady Golovkin. So Triple G was once again in a situation where no other title holder wanted to fight him, and therefore he wasn't able to unify the middleweight division at the time. Golovkin then went back to Monte Carlo in Europe, where he made another title defense, 7th round stoppage over Osumanu Adama, and then came back to the US where he finally fought Daniel Geale, but this time Daniel Geale was not a title holder but just a mere challenger. Triple G destroyed Daniel Geale inside 3 rounds, TKO victory, and then proceeded to fight Marco Antonio Rubio for the interim WBC middleweight title. And this was significant because at the time Sergio Martinez lost his WBC middleweight championship to Miguel Cotto, and Triple G wanted to unify the division more than anything, so he reached out to Marco Antonio Rubio, who was just an interim WBC title holder, and fought him so he could become Miguel Cotto's mandatory and force another title holder to fight him. However, Miguel Cotto was allowed to have a few optional title defenses by the WBC before fighting his mandatory Triple G, and it was at this point in time that Triple G successfully defended his WBA championship, his legitimate WBA championship, for 5 times, and therefore he was promoted to the WBA Super Champion, the same way Felix Sturm was promoted back in the day when Triple G was about to become his mandatory. And so Triple G went back to Monte Carlo and defended his title against the top contender Martin Murray, who only had 1 defeat and 1 draw at the time, both controversial. He lost a decision to Sergio Martinez in his hometown of Argentina. Everybody saw Martin Murray winning, so Sergio Martinez definitely got a hometown gift decision, and the draw was against Felix Sturm, a very close fight that he probably lost, to be honest, but still he had the draw with Felix Sturm and that controversial decision defeat to Sergio Martinez. At the time he challenged Triple G, but Triple G proved to be an entirely different beast. Martin Murray was battered, dropped multiple times, and finally broke down and stopped in the 11th round. Golovkin now went back to the US and defended his title, stopped Willie Monroe Jr., a slick mover, in the 6th round, and it was around this time that increasing talks were being held about the potential fight between Triple G and the super middleweight champion Andre Ward. So there was a lot of controversy about these negotiations. One side claims one thing, another side claims another thing, but in reality the fight fell through. Andre Ward, he insisted that the fight should be at 168 pounds with 50-50 split, and Triple G was about to have his first pay-per-view fight at the time, the unification fight against David Lemieux. So obviously the timing was bad, and also 1 year before that HBO put an offer on the table, both Triple G and Andre Ward, for Andre Ward super middleweight belt, and according to the sources it was Andre Ward that turned it down at the time. So after that he came back with another offer for Triple G, but it was too late because Triple G and David Lemieux was already being negotiated to take place on HBO pay-per-view. David Lemieux was one of the top fighters in the division. He won his belt in a vacant title fight against Hassan Mdam, dropping him multiple times, but he was not able to repeat that against Triple G. Triple G fought a smart fight with jab on the outside, slowly but surely broke down David Lemieux and stopped him in the 8th round, finally unifying the WBA and IBF Middleweight Championship of the world. 1 month after that, Miguel Cotto lost his WBC middleweight crown to Saul Canelo Alvarez in an optional fight, and therefore Canelo became two-weight world champion, and he was allowed to have one optional title defense before eventually getting ordered a Triple G fight. So Canelo went on and fought Amir Khan, knocking him out in the meantime, and Triple G went on and had an optional fight of his own against Dominic Wade, knocked him out in the 2 rounds, and then the WBC ordered Triple G and Canelo Alvarez to fight each other, but Canelo Alvarez decided to make a power move to show the WBC that they cannot boss him around. He vacated his WBC belt and kept his ring and lineal championship and went on about his business. So the WBC belt was then by default given to Triple G, who now became the unified WBA, WBC and IBF World Champion in the middleweight division. 2 months after that, in December 2015, Billy Joe Saunders became the WBA World Middleweight Champion, defeating Andy Lee, but unfortunately Billy Joe Saunders went on to have multiple injuries that kept him outside of the ring for a year, and there Triple G was forced to exploit other options, and that's what he did. He went on to have a pay-per-view in England. Originally it was supposed to be against Chris Eubank Jr., but basically what happened, there was a problem in negotiations, not between Triple G and Eubanks, but between Eubanks and Eddie Hearn, the matchroom promoter. So basically Eubank turned the fight down, and Triple G went on to fight the welterweight world champion Kell Brook at the middleweight division. So Kell Brook moved up 2 weight classes to challenge Triple G, and he gave a good account of himself. He was able to give Triple G some problems early in the fight, but the size difference was too much, the strength difference was too much, and Triple G was able to break down and stop Kell Brook in 5 rounds. After that, Triple G went back to the US for another pay-per-view fight against mandatory challenger, the WBA regular champion Danny Jacobs, where Triple G was making the 13th legitimate defense of his middleweight championship. Danny Jacobs was a lot tougher than expected. It was a very close fight, very tough fight, and basically what made the difference was a knockdown that Triple G scored in the 4th round, and therefore Triple G was able to secure another victory, unanimous decision, and another successful world title defense. And it was at this time that the mega fight that boxing fans wanted to see was finally agreed between Gennady Triple G Golovkin and Saul Canelo Alvarez for Golovkin's unified middleweight world titles and Canelo's Ring Magazine and lineal middleweight world titles. It was a huge pay-per-view event that took place in T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, and it was an all-time great slugfest. It was a very good fight, very competitive fight, very close fight, and it ended up being a majority draw. The scorecards were 115 to 113 for Gennady Golovkin, 114 a draw, and a very bad scorecard, 118-110 for Canelo Alvarez. Very controversial scorecard, and therefore there was a lot of controversy about this fight. A lot of people saw Triple G as the rightful winner. Canelo Alvarez believed that he won the fight, but obviously that very bad scorecard damaged Canelo Alvarez's case because it was a close fight and there was one judge scoring 10 rounds in favor of Canelo Alvarez, which just did not happen. But either way, they were bound for a rematch. That could not happen immediately because of clenbuterol problem that Canelo Alvarez had. He came out positive for that. He was cleared soon after, but unfortunately the fight was not able to be held in May 2018, and so Triple G, he went on and had another fight at that date. The only problem was he was supposed to fight his IBF mandatory Sergey Derevyanchenko, but he did not want to take that fight on such a short notice. Triple G's team probably believed that it was too much of a risk because there was a potential Canelo rematch after that, and so Triple G opted to be stripped of the IBF belt and went on to defend his WBA and WBC titles against Vanes Martirosyan, a non-top 10, non-top 15 opponent. It was not something that Triple G would typically do, but this time he chose money over belts and he went the least resistance direction. He knocked out Vanes Martirosyan in 2 rounds and proceeded to have a big rematch against Canelo Alvarez in September. And you know, a lot of people were bashing Canelo Alvarez from the first fight for fighting from the back foot. Triple G himself, he was saying that he was about Mexican style, not Canelo, but when the rematch happened, it was Canelo who was pushing the fight. It was Canelo who was bringing the fight to Triple G, and it was Triple G who was backing off and trying to fight off the jab. Anyway, it was another very close fight, very good fight, but this time Canelo Alvarez emerged victorious. Triple G was defeated for the first time in his career, and it was Canelo who became the new unified middleweight champion of the world. So from this point on, Triple G has been trying to secure the Canelo trilogy, the third fight, but Canelo Alvarez, he did not want to give Triple G that opportunity because all the disrespect he went through between the first and the second fight. So it remains to be seen whether the trilogy is gonna happen in the future or not. Either way, Canelo, he went on to sign a record-breaking DAZN deal. Triple G, he followed him, he signed a DAZN deal of his own and went to fight Steve Rolls of Canada in June 2019. It was a soft touch KO4 for Triple G, another victory, and then he went on to fight a guy that he vacated his IBF title rather to fight in the past, Sergey Derevyanchenko. The guy was the mandatory for Canelo Alvarez's IBF belt, and it was Canelo Alvarez, actually it was Golden Boy, that signed some protocol in the name of Canelo Alvarez. There was a big controversy between Canelo and Golden Boy because of that, but either way, Canelo Alvarez ended up being stripped, and it was Sergey Derevyanchenko versus Gennady Golovkin for the vacant IBF World Championship. It was a good fight, another war, close fight, and Gennady Golovkin emerged victorious. It was unanimous decision, but in reality it was a razor close fight, and Gennady Golovkin might be lucky to have escaped with a unanimous decision victory there. But either way, this was Gennady Golovkin's last fight before the COVID pandemic happened. He was out of the ring for more than a year, and he finally returned to the ring December 18, 2020 against a top 10 contender, a mandatory IBF challenger, Kamil Szeremeta. It was a great performance by Triple G. He dropped Szeremeta multiple times in the first round, second round, fourth round, seventh round, and obviously finally Kamil Szeremeta's corner surrendered, and therefore Triple G secured another TKO victory for the grand total of 43 fights, of which 41 victories, 1 defeat and 1 draw. So overall, a great career for Triple G, one of the greats, especially at the middleweight division. He's definitely going to have his place in history, but there's that question about the number of his title defenses. There are some media outlets, a lot of people and publications claiming that he has broken Bernard Hopkins' record and that he has now 21 world title defense at the middleweight division. But like we said, if we realistically look at it, his first 5 title defenses were just a regular WBA title defenses, while Felix Sturm was the legitimate WBA champion at the time, holding the Super WBA belt. So Triple G's defenses against Nelson Julio Tapia, Kasim Ouma, LaJuan Simon, Fujigami and Gregory Sproksa were not counted as the legitimate world championship middleweight title defenses, and therefore Triple G has a grand total of 16 title defenses in the middleweight division. But once again, Triple G, no doubt a great fighter. He still has some time in front of him, although he's currently the second oldest world champion in boxing. But anyway, he still has an opportunity to make several more title defenses in the middleweight division, or if he decides to try to secure that Canelo trilogy that a lot of people still want to see. Either way, Gennady Triple G Golovkin is no doubt one of the all-time greats in the middleweight division.